Get this picture in your head because I promise you, once you see it, you won't forget it. A packed courtroom on a Monday morning, the air thick with sweat, and whispers the kind of place where people don't come for truth, but for blood. And right there at the defense table sat a man named Derek Cole, 36 years old, broad-shouldered, quiet, the kind of man who looked like he'd carry the weight of the world on his back and never complained. He wasn't slouched, wasn't fidgeting. He just sat there with his hands folded on the table, eyes down on the wood grain, like maybe if he stared hard enough, he could disappear. What was he on trial for? Disturbing the peace at a corner store? That's what the paper said, a misdemeanor. But by the way the crowd muttered and shook their heads, you'd think he'd robbed a bank or set fire to a church. That's how rumors work in small towns. They grow teeth. Dangerous, unstable, one of those guys who thinks the rules don't apply to him. By the time Derek's case made it into that courtroom, the truth didn't stand a chance. The heavy doors banged open and in strutted Sergeant Blake Murphy, local cop, tall, square-jawed uniform, pressed sharp enough to cut glass. He walked like the room belonged to him, like the law itself bent around his swagger. The way his eyes locked on Derek told you everything. You weren't looking at a man delivering testimony. You were looking at a wolf who thought he'd already killed his prey. He leaned down just close enough so the people in the first row could hear and hissed, didn't think you'd be dumb enough to show your face. Derek didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just breathed slow and steady like a man who'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes stronger than any word you could say. At the bench, Judge Helen Strauss, gray hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful, peered over her glasses at Derek like she'd already decided the verdict before the first witness spoke, his lawyer. Angela Torres leaned close, whispering, "Let me handle this, Derek. Don't give them what they want." He gave the smallest smile, the kind that comes from someone who's been underestimated his whole life. "You really think they want the truth?" When Sergeant Murphy took the stand, his voice was full of that fake authority cops get when they know people will swallow their story no matter how bitter it tastes. The defendant was agitated, belligerent, wouldn't follow instructions. The kind of individual who's just waiting to get violent. That phrase, "people like that," hung heavy in the air. Everyone in that courtroom knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't about Derek's behavior. It was about his skin. Angela shot up. "Objection, Your Honor, speculation unfounded." Judge Strauss didn't even look up from her notes. Overruled. The crowd nodded along like sheep. Murphy smirked, stepped down, and instead of walking back to his seat, he strolled past Derek's chair. "Look at me when I talk to you," he muttered. Derek didn't. He just breathed in 4 counts, in 4 counts, out. That rhythm, that calm came from training. Not training in a classroom, not training in a gym. The kind of training where you're dropped into hell and told to survive. But Murphy wasn't finished. As he passed behind Derek, his boot shot out quick and sharp, slamming into Derek's shin beneath the table. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the woman in the second row gasp. Angela sprang up. "Your Honor, he just struck my client." Judge Strauss froze her with a glare, cold enough to stop a heartbeat. "Sit down, counselor. The record will reflect what I say it reflects." Camera shutters clicked from the press row. Murphy sat back down with that smug little grin, thinking he had just humiliated a man who couldn't fight back. But then it happened. That sound. A shrill phone ring that cut through the courtroom like a blade. Everyone turned as the clerk picked up, her voice steady at first. "Superior Court Clerk's Office." She listened, then her whole face changed. Color drained out like someone pulled the plug. She covered the receiver and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, they say it's the Department of Defense asking for you, by name." The whole room shifted, like the air pressure dropped. Judge Strauss snatched the phone, her voice tight. "This is Judge Strauss." She listened, her expression flickering for the first time all morning. Her eyes cut quick toward Derek. Her voice softened. "Yes, I understand. When she hung up, her hand shook just enough to betray her. Court will recess. And that's when the rumble started, outside, low, steady, mechanical. The kind of sound that doesn't belong on Main Street. Doors slammed, boots pounded pavement. Not the shuffle of courthouse regulars, but something sharper, heavier trained. The front doors swung open. 4 men strode in, not cops, not marshals. Navy dress, uniforms, gold insignias that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. They moved with purpose, and behind them came a man the whole room seemed to recognize without ever meeting him. Admiral Samuel Grant. White uniform, crisp medals lined across his chest, his presence alone enough to silence every whisper. His voice cracked the air like thunder. "Where is Derek Cole?" Every head turned. Why was a 4-star admiral looking for a man accused of disturbing the peace? Derek stood slowly. Their eyes met, and in that second, everyone in that courtroom understood this wasn't some random troublemaker. This was a man the military trusted with lives. The admiral's expression softened into something rare respect. He set a leather case on the judge's bench, the sound of it hitting wood echoing like a gunshot. "Declassified documentation authorized this morning. For your eyes only." Judge Strauss opened it. At first, nothing. Then her lips parted, her brow furrowed. She read line after line until her hand trembled. Admiral Grant turned, voice filling every corner. "You've been told this man is a defendant, but that is not the truth. Derek Cole is a decorated Navy SEAL. He led one of the most dangerous rescue missions in modern history. He went in with 6 men. He came out with 6 men and 23 hostages. Not one life lost." Gasps rippled. Phones dropped. Cameras clicked in frantic bursts. Grant's tone sharpened. "Right now, Derek Cole is a federally protected witness in a national security investigation. Any harm against him, any threat, any assault is a federal crime." All eyes landed on Sergeant Murphy, whose smirk had finally vanished. His face drained of color as the weight of what he'd done kicking Derek under that table settled on his shoulders like a death sentence. Then came the final blow. 2 military police officers stepped in crisp uniforms, a folded document in hand. They presented it to Admiral Grant, who turned toward the judge. "By order of the Department of Justice, we are here to execute an arrest warrant for Officer Blake Murphy for assaulting a federally protected witness." The sound of cuffs snapping shut around Murphy's wrists rang out like church bells. The gallery erupted in whispers, this time not judgment, but awe. Murphy struggled, his face red. "You can't do this. This is my courtroom." Admiral Grant's voice cut him down. "This was never your courtroom. It belongs to the people, and you betrayed it." The MPs dragged Murphy out, boots scraping across the floor. And in that silence, Derek finally spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to cut steel. "You thought you were above the law. Turns out the law was above you all along." For the first time that day, people looked at Derek not as a criminal, but as a man who had carried more than they'd ever understand. Outside, reporters swarmed. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to see justice? What do you want the public to remember?" He paused on the courthouse steps, gave a small, steady smile. "That doing the right thing isn't about what's easy, it's about what's necessary." He didn't say another word. He climbed into a black SUV, Admiral Grant at his side, the crowd parting with something that hadn't been there that morning: respect. And as the vehicle pulled away, the young reporter who'd been scribbling in the back row closed his laptop. The headline he'd started, "Local Man Arrested for Disturbing Peace," was gone. Because this wasn't just a local story, it was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the man everyone overlooks is the very one holding the line for all of us. That sometimes justice doesn't come from a gavel, but from truth finally being spoken out loud. Now I want to ask you, what do you see when you look at someone like Derek Cole? Do you see another rumor, another stereotype, another man to judge before you know the story? Or do you see the possibility that the quietest person in the room might just be the hero? Nobody expected. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you have ever seen justice delayed, denied, or finally delivered right in front of your eyes. Because this story isn't just about Derek, it's about all of us.